There are few crossroads as silently significant as the moment you opt to release another soul, not fueled by resentment, not driven by retribution, but born from a lucid understanding. It's the instant you cease to grasp, when you liberate not just the individual, but the very tether of attachment, the ingrained need, the carefully constructed illusion. In this act, you don't merely experience a loss. You encounter your own essence anew. Letting go transcends passivity. It's not a surrender, nor is it a mark of defeat. Instead, it's a profound inner act of bravery, a spiritual rite of passage. Observe closely, and you'll witness a subtle, yet fundamental shift the instant this decision solidifies. The very architecture of your psyche begins to rearrange itself. What was once dispersed finds its center. What felt fragmented starts to coalesce. When you finally arrive at that quiet juncture where you decide to release someone, not in a blaze of anger, not in dramatic defiance, but from a deep, resonant inner knowing, a profound stirring commences within the hidden depths of your being. This movement is not clamorous. It's not immediately apparent. It initiates in the shadows, the perennial crucible of genuine transformation. You might first perceive it as an overwhelming weariness, as if your very soul can no longer bear the weight of striving to be seen, understood, or cherished in an environment that consistently negates your true essence. And so, in that hushed inner sanctuary, you utter, "Enough," not with bitterness, but with unwavering truth. And in that precise moment, the soul begins its subtle yet significant realignment. This act of surrender marks the genesis of something far more spiritually resonant than its surface appearance suggests. It may feel like the conclusion of a connection, but beneath the visible realm, in the unseen chambers of your inner world, a deeper current awakens, the nascent stirrings of liberation. For the very act of letting go unveils a truth you may have long resisted. You were never in control. You could never coerce understanding, force closeness, or manufacture love. What you could do was mold yourself, reshape your being, contort and diminish your essence, and relentlessly overextend yourself. And you did, all in the name of love, fueled by hope, clinging to the illusion that if you offered enough, you would, in turn, be enough. This illusion, however well-intentioned, exacts a heavy toll on the soul. It imprisons you in a state of subtle exile from your authentic nature. You don the mask not out of deceit, but because it seemed the only way to remain near what your heart desired. You muted your own voice, softened your inherent truth, and carefully managed the depths of your being. Yet, beneath this carefully constructed compromise, your true spirit patiently awaits. It awaits the moment when you no longer mistake attachment for genuine affection. It awaits your homecoming. Letting go shatters the illusion of control that the ego so fiercely guards. We yearn to believe we can mold another's capacity to love us. We rationalize that if we exhibit more patience, more kindness, more unwavering forgiveness, we can somehow coax tenderness from indifference. But genuine affection is not forged through self-sacrifice. It is revealed through authentic presence. And presence cannot be compelled. Letting go, then, is the moment you cease the performance. It's the instant the mask falls away, and what follows is an unfamiliar stillness, akin to the quietude after a tempest, a profound clarity that whispers, "I was never meant to beg for what should be freely offered." In spiritual terms, this is a form of death, not of the true self, but of the false construct, the one who strived so tirelessly to be chosen, the one who equated their inherent worth with being needed, the one who perpetually waited for a reciprocity that never materialized. This death is undeniably painful, yet it is absolutely necessary. Without it, the deeper, authentic self cannot emerge. Without it, your soul remains locked in a recurring cycle of reaching, performing, and perpetually wondering why genuine affection always feels just beyond your grasp. When the illusion finally crumbles, it can feel as though the world has fallen silent. You might look around, questioning your very identity now that the role you so diligently played is no longer required. This is not emptiness, it is sacred ground. It is the fertile void where your authentic nature begins to take root. You are no longer attempting to manage another's perception of you. You are no longer diminishing your own being to avoid abandonment. You are no longer clinging to a distorted version of affection that demands your disappearance. And in this profound act of letting go, what you gain transcends mere freedom. It is the very first unadulterated glimpse of who you truly are. To the external world, it may appear as a loss, but within the depths of your soul, a profound truth is recognized. Something inauthentic has reached its conclusion, and something genuinely real is beginning to unfold. You cease seeking your reflection in someone else's eyes, and instead begin the courageous inward journey, where your reflection is whole, unconditional, and where your inherent worth is no longer subject to debate. And from that centered place, everything begins to transform. You may still experience the pangs of grief, the ache of longing, but these feelings are no longer binding chains. They are merely transient emotional states, like passing weather. What remains beneath the ebb and flow of these emotions is a newly discovered center, a deeper sense of trust in your own being, a quiet knowing that you are no longer at the mercy of another's capacity or inability to offer you genuine affection. And that, truly, is the genesis of spiritual sovereignty. This is where true freedom commences. Once the illusion of control has dissolved and you have surrendered to the profound truth that holding on is no longer serving the deepest needs of your soul. As the illusion of control fades and you surrender to the truth that clinging no longer serves your soul, something else begins to surface, often unsettling, frequently intense, and rarely fully understood. It doesn't arrive with immediate relief. Instead, it brings a period of waiting. You begin to feel emotions you believed you had already processed, old wounds reopen, and buried memories rise like smoke from beneath the floorboards. There is anger, confusion, sorrow. You might even question yourself, wondering why, after finally letting go, the pain seems to intensify rather than dissipate. This speaks to the depths of unresolved inner turmoil. This is because letting go isn't solely about moving on from another person. It's about confronting what you once used that connection to avoid. When we are deeply attached to another, especially one who cannot or does not fully meet our needs, we often remain entangled not purely out of affection, but because the attachment provides a distraction from deeper, older pain. The relationship becomes an unconscious container where our unhealed wounds can quietly reside beneath the surface. And when that container breaks, it shatters too, releasing everything that was hidden within into the forefront of our consciousness. This emotional flood is not your adversary. It is your inheritance. It is the shadow, the unacknowledged part of yourself that was never permitted to speak while you were preoccupied with being lovable, pleasing, or chosen. It encompasses every moment of abandonment you didn't allow yourself to fully feel, every instance where you felt not enough for someone you loved, every aspect of yourself you consciously tucked away so as not to be too much. And now, with no one left to appease, the soul brings all of it to the surface. It can feel overwhelming, even like a regression, but it is neither. It is not a step backward. It is a crucial step inward. You are not falling apart. You are coming into direct contact with the parts of yourself that have lived in silence. You are meeting your pain not to wallow in it, but to finally understand it. And understanding is the very genesis of liberation. These old wounds do not resurface to torment you. They emerge for integration. You cannot truly heal what you do not consciously face. You cannot reclaim the fullness of your being while actively rejecting the fragmented pieces that were broken. When you finally release someone who did not recognize your inherent worth, what initially rises is your own questioning. Why didn't they? But beneath that surface inquiry lies a far deeper one. Why did I? This is the profound purpose of the shadow's return, to illuminate the parts of yourself you have not yet fully welcomed and integrated. You may encounter feelings of shame, deep resentment, even rage, especially if you spent years minimizing your own truth for the sake of a superficial peace within the relationship. But this is not the time to flee. It is the time to sit, to listen intently, to allow your soul the space to articulate what it could never freely express within the confines of that connection. You might hear it whisper, "I am weary of pretending," or "I deserve to be held without having to earn it," or "I am inherently worthy, even when I experience anger, sadness, or fear." This is sacred inner work. It is not glamorous. It doesn't resemble some idealized notion of enlightenment, but it is the very foundation upon which genuine healing is built. Every aspect of yourself that rises in the profound silence left behind by that person is a part of you yearning for its long overdue homecoming. This process is not about assigning blame to the other. It is about finally turning toward yourself with the same unwavering presence you once so desperately sought from them. And as you begin to gently, consistently tend to these exiled parts of your being, a subtle yet significant shift begins to occur. The pain, while still present, becomes clearer, more meaningful. You start to perceive that the grief was never solely about the loss of them. It was deeply intertwined with your own disconnection, your own self-imposed silence, your own forgetting of your inherent worth. And now, because you chose to let go, because you finally stopped chasing after what could never truly nourish you, you have created the necessary space to remember. You remember your authentic voice. You reestablish healthy boundaries. You remember that your emotions are not excessive burdens, but rather vital messengers. You remember that you were never meant to shrink your being. What rises after the act of letting go is not just sadness. It is your own raw, unpolished power, demanding to be acknowledged and lived fully. The shadow is not inherent darkness. It is simply the truth that has lived without the illuminating light of your conscious awareness. And now, it is returning not to destroy you, but to finally complete you. This is the profound way in which your soul begins its journey home. As the shadow emerges and the unhealed wounds begin to surface, demanding your attention, another profound shift takes place in the soul's journey: the gradual dissolution of projections. These projections are not merely simple misunderstandings or fleeting judgments. They are deeper, far more subtle. The unconscious ways in which we attribute qualities, strengths, and even perceived deficiencies to another person based on our own unprocessed needs, desires, and underlying fears. Within relationships, we often place the other on a pedestal, ascribing to them the very qualities we feel we lack or deeply long to possess. Or, conversely, we cast them into specific roles, savior or villain, attaching them to the intricate dramas of our own internal landscape. When you finally let go of someone, the first significant occurrence is the slow but steady fading of these ingrained projections. The person who once seemed to hold the very keys to your happiness, your sense of validation, your intrinsic worth, begins to shrink, to take their rightful place not as a mirror reflecting your unhealed self, but as an individual being in their own right. They are no longer the perceived source of your fluctuating feelings, your fragile self-esteem, or your unmet needs. And this marks the beginning of a profound spiritual awakening, the dawning recognition that the world does not solely revolve around your individual experience, nor does it solely revolve around theirs. The underlying truth is far more expansive and interconnected. Initially, this dissolution of projections can feel deeply disorienting. For so long, your very identity was partially constructed through the lens of the other person's perception of you. When that familiar mirror shatters, it can feel as though you are suddenly lost, untethered. Who are you without their gaze? Who are you without their approval or disapproval, without their constant validation or critique? And yet, within this space of perceived vulnerability, something else is quietly and powerfully unfolding. The space that was once filled with the intricate web of your projections is now becoming empty, available for something far truer and more authentically aligned with your being to finally rise and take its place. You begin to see yourself as you truly are, not as the person you believed you needed to be in order to earn their elusive affection, but as the unique and valuable individual who exists regardless of whether or not they ever fully recognized or appreciated your true essence. As these ingrained projections gradually dissolve, the ego's long-held role as the vigilant guardian of these illusions begins to weaken. The deep-seated need to be loved in a specific, conditional way starts to fall away, and you begin to understand that genuine affection is not about being seen by someone else in the precise way you desire to be seen. It is fundamentally about cultivating the ability to truly see yourself, to recognize your own inherent worth without relying on external validation. The more you courageously move through the often uncomfortable process of letting go, the more profoundly you begin to understand that the very affection you so desperately sought was never truly meant to originate from another person. It was always meant to emanate from within your own being. The dissolution of projections is also the crucial unveiling of what has long been hidden beneath them, your true, authentic self. For when we unconsciously place another person at the very center of our emotional universe, we are simultaneously concealing significant parts of ourselves from conscious awareness, particularly those aspects that have been previously rejected, neglected, or deemed unacceptable. We often harbor the subconscious hope that the other person will somehow miraculously fulfill the perceived emptiness within us, completing what we feel is inherently missing. But this is ultimately a deceptive illusion. We wait, often unconsciously, for someone else to make us feel whole, and when they inevitably cannot fulfill this impossible task, we either sink further into despair and dependence, or we begin the arduous, but ultimately liberating work of reclaiming our own fragmented and disowned parts. The most profound and lasting healing comes when you finally realize, deep within your being, that no external person can ever truly complete you. No one can ever fully fill the void you once unconsciously projected onto them. It is within this transformative process that you begin to reclaim that elusive inner peace, that fundamental sense of wholeness, not by endlessly searching outward, but by courageously turning inward to face the unacknowledged landscapes of your own soul. The challenging journey of letting go ultimately becomes a profound journey of self-discovery, where you no longer feel the desperate need to lean on another person to define your inherent worth or to validate your very existence. The ingrained projections gradually fall away, and you can finally begin to stand firmly in your own authentic truth, unencumbered by the heavy weight of what you once thought you desperately needed from someone else. Simultaneously, the other person begins to appear in their truest form as well, no longer the idealized savior or the demonized villain of your internal narrative, no longer the one who seemingly held the absolute power to determine your fluctuating sense of worth. They are revealed as simply another complex human being, navigating their own unique life journey, grappling with their own inherent fears, experiencing their own fleeting joys, and facing their own personal struggles. This profound shift in perception allows you to finally release the often painful fantasy of who you desperately wanted them to be in your life, and to accept them for who they truly are, flawed, complex, and ultimately not responsible for your fundamental emotional well-being. And with this hard-won acceptance, there comes a profound sense of peace. Not just peace with them as an individual, but more importantly, a deep and abiding peace with yourself. You finally recognize, on a visceral level, that your intrinsic value was never truly tied to their actions, their words, or their capacity for affection. And in seeing them with clear and unclouded eyes, you finally begin to see yourself with the same clarity and unwavering compassion. What naturally follows this profound shift in perspective is a deepening of self-compassion. When you courageously cease projecting your own unhealed needs and unmet expectations onto another person, you simultaneously create the necessary space for genuine self-love to emerge in its purest and most authentic form. True self-love does not originate from feeding the ego or indulging in narcissistic desires. Rather, it blossoms from a deep and honest recognition of your own shared humanity, your inherent vulnerability, and your undeniable inner strength. It arises from the fundamental understanding that you are inherently worthy of love and belonging simply because you exist, not because you are perfect, not because you are always giving, but because you are fundamentally enough, exactly as you are in this moment. And as you actively begin to dissolve these ingrained projections, you also begin to see the other person in the full light of their own humanity, which can often bring about a profound sense of forgiveness, if not necessarily for their specific actions, then certainly for your own part in the dynamic. You begin to gently forgive yourself for believing that another person could ever truly fulfill needs that only you could ultimately address within yourself. You forgive yourself for clinging to the hope that someone could be something they were never truly capable of being. You forgive yourself for the deep-seated need for them to be different in order for you to finally feel complete and whole. And within this profound act of self-forgiveness, there is a tangible sense of release, a lightness of being. You no longer hold them captive in a role they never consciously agreed to play, and you simultaneously release yourself from the impossible burden of upholding an idealized image you never truly needed to embody. When the ingrained projections finally dissolve, so too does the heavy emotional weight you have carried for so long. What you are ultimately left with is a profound sense of inner freedom, the liberation to exist as your truest self, unencumbered by the relentless need for external validation. This is the genuine spiritual freedom that arises when you courageously let go, the freedom to finally feel whole, to recognize your own inherent sufficiency, to love yourself authentically without needing someone else to mirror that love back to you. And within this hard-won freedom, you discover a deep and abiding inner peace. When you finally let go of someone who no longer serves your highest good, a profound moment of inner silence inevitably follows. It may be subtle at first, perhaps an unsettling stillness, a brief pause in the usual cacophony of your everyday life. But if you consciously choose to sit with this quietude long enough, you will begin to notice something significant stirring beneath the surface, a quiet, unspoken presence, the gentle awakening of your deeper, authentic self. This is a pivotal moment in your journey, the very beginning of the soul's gradual realignment, a sacred time when you can consciously start to reconnect with the fundamental essence of who you truly are. Letting go is not simply an act of releasing the other person from your emotional grasp. It is also a profound act of returning to the core of your own being. So often, in the intricate dance of a relationship, we can lose touch with the very center of our own existence. We become so deeply enmeshed in the complexities of connection, in the constant striving to be understood and loved, that we inadvertently forget the inherent stillness that resides at the very heart of our being. We forget that before anyone else's voice, before their needs and expectations, there was the silent, constant hum of our own soul. When you courageously let go, that fundamental hum becomes audible once more. It is the authentic voice of your true self, untainted by the relentless need to perform or constantly appease. It is the quiet whisper that gently guides you back to a place of inner balance, profound peace, and unwavering clarity. You no longer feel the compulsion to mold yourself to fit into the limited confines of someone else's world. You no longer need to pretend or suppress your own inherent truth for the fleeting sake of being accepted. The relief that washes over you with this realization is profound, as if you have been unconsciously holding your breath for years and are finally, at long last, exhaling fully. In this newly found space of inner silence, the constant ache of hoping, of perpetually waiting for something from the other person, begins to subside. The persistent strain of trying to please, to earn affection, or to validate your own intrinsic worth finally starts to dissipate. For the first time in what might feel like a very long time, you can truly breathe freely within the confines of your own skin. You begin to deeply realize that your inherent worth was never dependent on another person's recognition or affirmation. It was always present within you, quietly waiting to be acknowledged and embraced. This is the gentle yet powerful awakening of your inner self, the core of your being that does not require external validation to exist. It doesn't desperately need to be seen or acknowledged in the specific ways you once believed it did. It is inherently whole and complete, always has been, and always will be. This authentic self does not shrink or diminish itself to fit into smaller spaces. Instead, it naturally expands and flourishes when you consciously create the necessary space for it to do so. When you finally cease looking outside of yourself for your fundamental sense of wholeness, and instead courageously begin to turn inward, it is as if a long-held veil gently lifts, and you are able to see your own being clearly for the very first time. You perceive yourself not as a mere extension of someone else's expectations or desires, but as a unique and valuable being with your own distinct desires, your own inherent purpose, and your own undeniable worth. The authentic self that awakens within you is not necessarily perfect, nor is it entirely free of flaws or past wounds, but it is undeniably genuine. It is the part of you that embraces both the illuminating light and the inherent shadows within your being. It is the core of you that deeply knows you are worthy, not because of your actions or how well you meet the perceived needs of others, but simply because you exist. It is a profound and visceral recognition that you have always been fundamentally enough, and that no external person ever truly held the power to define your inherent value. This profound awakening often brings with it a deep and pervasive sense of inner calm. It is as though the turbulent storms of the past have finally cleared, leaving behind a profound stillness, a quiet certainty that emanates from within your very being. No longer does your sense of inner peace precariously depend on the approval or fleeting affection of another person. The external world may continue its swirling dance, and relationships may inevitably come and go, but you remain grounded in the unwavering truth of who you are at your core. This is the genuine spiritual alignment that naturally arises with the courageous act of letting go. You no longer feel the desperate need to look outside of yourself for the answers you seek. Instead, you discover them within the quiet wisdom of your own being. You cease relying on someone else's love to validate your existence, and instead deeply realize that the very love you so earnestly sought was always meant to originate from within your own heart. What naturally follows is a deep and gentle sense of inner peace. There is no longer a persistent need to constantly fix, to endlessly heal, or to prove your worth to the world. You are finally allowed to simply be, in all your imperfect and beautiful humanity. And in this profound state of simply being, something even deeper and more expansive emerges. A tangible connection to the very flow of life itself. You begin to feel the subtle pulse of the universe, the intricate interconnectedness of all things. You begin to understand, on a visceral level, that you are not a separate, isolated entity, but rather an integral and valuable part of a greater, unified whole. And from this profound understanding arises a deep and unwavering trust in the natural unfolding of your own unique life journey. You no longer feel the desperate need to force or control every outcome. Instead, you simply trust the inherent flow of existence. You trust that what is truly meant for you will inevitably find its way to you in its own perfect time and in its own unique form. The awakening of this deeper self is not merely an abstract spiritual experience. It is a fundamental return to your truest nature, a profound coming home to the very place where you are most deeply aligned with who you were always meant to be. You begin to see that the struggles, the inevitable pain, and the significant relationships that have shaped your life were all necessary and integral steps in this ongoing unfolding process. You perceive them not as insurmountable obstacles or personal failures, but rather as powerful catalysts for profound growth and self-discovery. When you courageously choose to let go, you consciously create the necessary conditions for this deeper self to finally emerge and flourish. It is not a dramatic or instantaneous transformation, but rather a subtle and ongoing process of consciously coming into deeper alignment with your own authentic essence. You may not consciously feel it in every single moment, but the more you learn to trust your own inner wisdom, and the more you allow yourself to simply be without pretense, the more this deeper self will gradually reveal itself to you. And when it does, you will discover a profound sense of ease, a deep feeling of belonging, and a clear sense of purpose that was always present within you, patiently waiting for you to finally listen in the quiet stillness that follows the courageous decision to let go. Within that unexpected silence, you may discover something truly extraordinary. It is not the emptiness you once feared. It is not the stark absence of love. Rather, it is the powerful presence of your own soul, finally whole and undivided, ready to lovingly guide you toward the life that is truly and authentically yours. And in this profound awakening, you finally come home to yourself. When you finally choose to let go of someone who consistently fails to recognize your inherent worth, something remarkably powerful begins to unfold within you. It is as though, in the absence of that draining presence, you are compelled to return to the rich landscape of your own internal world, and in doing so, you begin to discover the vastness and profound richness of your own unique existence. This courageous moment of release allows your soul to reconnect with its truest purpose, with the very essence of who you are and why you are here. Until we consciously come to terms with our own unhealed wounds, this reconnection can feel like a deep and profound recalibration, one that transcends the specifics of any individual relationship, allowing you to tap into a universal sense of belonging that was always inherently available to you, but was often overshadowed by your intense emotional investment in someone who ultimately failed to recognize your true value. This profound reconnection with your own inherent purpose is not merely an intellectual realization. It is a deep and visceral knowing that is felt throughout your entire being, within the depths of your body, the chambers of your heart, and the very core of your spirit. When we remain tethered to someone who does not truly value us, we often lose sight of our own deeper calling, our inherent sense of direction. Our attention subtly shifts away from the internal compass that should be guiding us and becomes fixated on seeking external validation from a source that can never truly satisfy our deepest needs. We can become lost in the exhausting endeavor of trying to mold ourselves into what the other person seemingly wants or needs, often inadvertently abandoning significant parts of our own authentic selves in the process. But once we make the courageous decision to let go, the true direction of our soul begins to gently rise to the surface of our awareness. We consciously stop looking outward for validation and instead courageously begin the inward journey of self-discovery. In doing so, we begin to rediscover the long-dormant dreams, the forgotten passions, and the deeply held desires that were often consciously or unconsciously put aside for the perceived sake of the relationship. We begin to truly realize that we are the architects of our own destiny and that we do not require anyone else's permission or approval to step fully into our own unique and boundless potential. The challenging process of letting go then becomes a profound journey of reclamation. You actively reclaim your forgotten dreams, you reestablish your own internal sense of direction, and you rediscover the fundamental belief that your own desires are inherently valid and absolutely worth pursuing. No longer held back by the heavy weight of another person's indifference or lack of appreciation, you begin to perceive the vastness of the world that lies before you, a world filled with endless possibilities for profound growth, genuine joy, and deep personal fulfillment. This is a powerful and transformative spiritual awakening, the kind that deeply stirs the soul and gently invites it to remember its own true and unadulterated essence. It serves as a potent reminder that we are not meant to shrink ourselves to fit into the limited and often distorted views of others. Rather, we are inherently meant to courageously grow into the fullest and most authentic expression of who we truly are. When you finally let go of someone who does not serve your highest good, you also begin to release the deeply ingrained and often limiting beliefs that have become unconsciously tied to that very relationship. Often, we internalize the negative messages we receive from others, especially when those messages are consistently dismissive, subtly hurtful, or overtly neglectful. We may begin to question our own inherent worthiness, our fundamental ability to give and receive genuine affection, or even our basic right to experience happiness and fulfillment in our lives. But as you consciously release that person from your emotional hold, you simultaneously release the false and damaging narratives they may have unknowingly or even intentionally imposed upon you. You no longer have to carry the heavy weight of their judgment or their perceived rejection. You begin to shed the unnecessary layers of self-doubt and deep insecurity that were never truly yours to bear in the first place. Instead, you are ultimately left with a clean and uncluttered slate, a powerful and precious opportunity to consciously reframe your own self-concept and to rediscover the inherent and undeniable value that resides within you. In this newfound space of self-acceptance, you begin to realign with your own authentic self, reconnecting with the vital parts of your being that were often obscured by the emotional noise and deep confusion of the imbalanced relationship. The more you courageously allow yourself to step into your own inherent power, the more profoundly you begin to recognize the unwavering strength that lies dormant within you. And as you do, you begin to perceive the quiet beauty of your own unique soul reflected in everything around you. The universe, once a vast and uncertain expanse, now feels more like a familiar and welcoming landscape, one that embraces your return with open arms. You are no longer a passive passenger on someone else's predetermined journey. You are finally the active driver of your own. This profound reconnection with your own inherent purpose also brings with it a deeper and more intuitive understanding of your own unique place in the world. You begin to perceive that your life holds profound meaning, not because of who you are in relation to another individual, but because of who you are in relation to the vast and interconnected universe itself. You start to deeply understand that your own unique perspective, your own individual gifts, and your own personal life journey are all inherently valuable contributions to the greater tapestry of existence. You no longer feel the desperate need for someone else to tell you that you are worthy or that your life truly matters. Instead, you come to know, deep within the very marrow of your bones, that your existence is inherently significant simply because you are alive. Letting go also liberates you from the pervasive illusion that your own happiness or profound fulfillment is somehow dependent on another person's presence or approval. You begin to truly realize that your own deep sense of purpose does not need to be tethered to someone else's fleeting affection or external acknowledgement. This realization is profoundly liberating because it firmly places you back in the driver's seat of your own life. No longer will you passively wait for someone else to make you feel whole or to guide you toward your own true potential. You are the one who holds the power to actively create meaning in your own life, to consciously decide what truly brings you joy, and to courageously chart your own unique course forward. This newfound clarity, this powerful return to your own inherent purpose, brings with it a deep and abiding sense of inner freedom. You are finally free from the often suffocating emotional entanglements that once bound you. And in that liberating freedom, you discover a new and profound depth of self-awareness. You become acutely aware of your own deeply felt needs and long-held desires in ways that you may have previously overlooked or consciously suppressed. You come to understand, on a visceral level, that your own emotional and spiritual well-being is not someone else's responsibility to manage. It is yours and yours alone. And with this profound understanding comes a deep sense of inner peace, a peace that naturally arises from the empowering knowledge that your own happiness ultimately resides within your own hands, that you are the one who gets to actively choose the very trajectory of your own life. The more you consciously lean into this rediscovered sense of purpose, the more you begin to feel the natural flow of life moving effortlessly through you. You gradually stop fighting against the inherent current of your own existence and instead begin to move in harmonious alignment with it. You allow the vast universe to gently guide you, trusting that as long as you remain authentically aligned with your own deepest truth, you will always be divinely led to exactly where you need to be, in its own perfect time and in its own unique form. There is no longer the persistent need to control, to force outcomes, or to manipulate situations. Instead, you simply allow yourself to be, to naturally grow, and to authentically flourish in your own unique way.